Hello and welcome back to the studio. Today I'm painting Splashes of Autumn, but this isn't it. No, this is Splashes of Spring. That's right, I took a Bob Ross classic painting Splashes of Autumn and I changed the seasons. It's a simple way of doing another version of one of Bob's paintings. One of my lovely subscribers asked me if I could include a silver birch, so I've done one of those as well. Now, there's also a little field trip in my video. We went out to somewhere local where you might see some inspiration for a little extra colour for this painting and potentially maybe something new for us to paint in future. I'll let you decide what that is, but there's lots of clues. Anyway, you know the routine. Sit back, paints at the ready, get your brushes all lined up and let's get painting Splashes of Spring. Happy painting, people. So here's my canvas, 16 inches by 20 as usual, and I need to start off with a bit of an underpainting. I need to use some acrylics. On my plate I have some sap green, pale yellow and some white. The pale yellow is just cad yellow and white mixed together. I'm going to use a piece of car sponge. I've given it a little bit of a treatment with a pair of pliers just to make it a bit more bumpy and lumpy like the surface of the moon. I'm going to start off by applying the cad yellow and white mixture. I want to sort of create maybe the image of a distant tree line, a bit of a dip in the centre. Whatever I'm doing up there, I'll try and repeat in the water. I want these colours to be a little paler, so I've just dipped my sponge into a bit of white. I allow them to mix together on the canvas. The horizon line for my painting is a little higher than the halfway down the canvas. You don't need to be too accurate with reflections. There's a lot of leeway. Now, let's go into some sap green. Again, I just allow this to mix on the sponge and on the canvas. There, don't forget, tap out the paint to break up any blobs. Now, to establish this horizon line a little more strongly, just a few taps to start with. Get a feel for it. Time for a top tip. When you're using a piece of sponge, you can get repeating patterns by mistake almost. So don't forget, spin the sponge over occasionally to vary the strokes. There, that looks so much nicer. I'm going to reinforce that horizon line. It's actually going to be a distant riverbank. I'll leave this to dry. I'll use my special art watch to set a timer. Gosh, need a new battery. Let's now go into some black and mix that in with that lovely green colour. Once again, tap your sponge well to break up any blobs of paint. I'll start on just the edge here and see what it looks like. Yes, that looks okay. Always go gently at this. You don't want to be rushing it and putting it in the wrong place. It's easy enough to repair, but nice if you can get it right pretty much first time. In the foreground, I'm going to have some more foliage, and I want some darker reflections too. Here you see, I'm working on my distant riverbank. Using acrylic to underpaint your scene is a wonderful technique, and one I encourage you to use now and again. It gives you an idea of how to lay out a painting in advance. It means you can then glaze over it with oil colour. But make sure your underpainting is completely dry before you go into oils. For my painting I'm going to be using two Bob Ross 1-inch brushes, an old one for the liquid clear and a nice new one for blending. I'll also be using my usual brushes, a liner, a filbert and a fan brush, and of course a Bob Ross palette knife. I also be using a 1-inch oval brush. These are lovely brushes for creating bushes and trees, long soft bristles, wonderful. Lots of tips and tricks on how to use it best. To start my canvas I'm going to be using this Bob Ross liquid clear oil paint. This is a wet on wet oil painting technique. I store it in a little airtight container. I keep it in the freezer to keep it fresh. Now, using my old 1-inch Bob Ross brush, I want to scrub this onto my canvas very, very thinly. Make sure you apply only a very thin coat. If it's too thick, your canvas will become very wet and runny. In the blink of an eye, my canvas is prepared. But let's have a quick look and see how well I've coated it. I'll use a torch, and you can see if I run my finger across the canvas, I don't leave a trail. Perfect. I made a video all about using liquid clear. I'll leave a link up here in the corner. I want to use this brush again, but not before I give it a dry clean on a paper towel. Just look at all that liquid clear. That would have caused me lots of problems. Here's my palette for today's painting. I'll list all these colours down below in the description. But my first colour is going to be this one, Phthalo Blue. Again on that old brush. Phthalo Blue is an extremely strong colour. A little too much and you'll have a bright blue painting. So apply it very sparingly and tap it well on the palette. I'll even take a little off on a paper towel. There. Now, start in the corners. If it's too strong, I prefer it to be up here than right in the centre of my painting. I'm not sure if this is too strong. I think this probably could do with a little bit more taken off. I'd rather apply it twice, thinly, than once too heavily. I'm going to just dance in an easy little sky. Phthalo Blue is a transparent colour, and what happens when it hits that light pale yellow colour? I get lime green. Just perfect for a spring painting. I also leave some of the canvas peeking through to create some sort of soft fluffy clouds. Now finish off with some long flat strokes. But let's not forget the reflections. I'll add some more in the watery areas. Now you can see how those little blobs of paint on my sponge start to look like reflections of the trees above. I dry clean that brush and I'm going to go straight into some black and add a little sap green to it. I'm just going to mix these on the palette and on the brush. Notice how I tap and really splay those bristles open. I want to just reinforce some of these trees in the background. I use just the corner of my brush and tap gently. I want to create a textured surface. But I also want to save that lovely bright lime green edge, as though sunlight were just peeking over the trees and illuminating them, giving them that lovely sort of limey green shine. I'll build up my trees a little here and there, letting the paint fade out now and then. There, saving those little bright edges. I also want to add to my reflections, so with just a little colour left on my brush, I just press and pull down. I want this colour to look almost transparent, but don't brush across. I want to save that for later. To give my trees some structure, I go into a little bit of Van Dyke Brown with a tiny drop of thinners. Now, hold your brush well back and paint just with the very point of the brush. Oh, that's so thin you can't even see it. Let's get a little closer. There. As you can see, just let your brush dance across the canvas, adding lots of sticks and twigs. We'll add some foliage over them so you won't see all of this, so just put in enough to make the structure show. Take care though. Liquid clear and thinners, they don't get on very well and they can react, so maybe not to use too much thinners. I'm not such a fan of what I'm doing here now. I actually seem to have gotten these two trees on the side here to look almost identical. I'll fix that later on. I have a neat trick. Oops, I even put a blob in the water there, but I'll just rub that out and no one will know. Time to bring out the oval 1-inch Bob Ross brush. I'm going to go into Cad Yellow and Indian Yellow and a little sap green. Notice I hold my brush the same way up each time, the Bob Ross logo showing just above my thumb. Now, look how I press my brush on the palette. This is how my brush wants to look. Lovely, open and lacy. If it's all closed up and clogged up, it won't work so well. Now, gentle touches. I'm not such a fan of this colour. It's a bit too mustard, I think. Let's go back and remix. I've taken a little tiny bit of titanium white into my colour. And again, notice how I really press and splay the bristles. That's better. A little bit brighter. Vary your colours and build up your trees in layers. But don't over paint them. Leave a lot of the dark colours showing through underneath. This brush does a wonderful job at making trees and bushes very quickly, and sometimes maybe just a bit too quickly. Do a little, stand back. Do a little more, stand back. I want to just go over some of these trunks and branches so I'll push them back into the painting a little further. Just so that colour didn't feel left out on the left, I've added a bit to the trees on the right. I've decided to add a little bit of phthalo green to my palette, but not just to be used on its own. Use it with sap green. This will sort of moderate the colour, because phthalo green can be, well, a bit of a bully. So, a little bit of phthalo green, mainly sap green, and some cadmium yellow, and Indian yellow, and wow, just look how those bushes just sing out. I'll add a little here and there, but again, not too much. I want to just add a little bit of colour in the water for my reflections. Almost no paint on my brush for this. And finally, I can just pull down gently. Notice that I'm using just my fingers and thumbs to brush the paint down for my reflections. Too hard and everything will just smear together. I don't even think I went across with this. Well, I didn't film it, so I don't think I did. Time for a waterline, because if I remember rightly, the waterlines will cover most of my reflections anyway. Notice how I just tap into a bit of that grubby white paint, and with the knife held absolutely level, just start by pressing and pushing and sort of scrubbing backwards and forwards. As you come around the bend on the left hand side, just do it in a series of little steps, always staying level. Now you can see me going across those reflections. I'm sure that's the reason why I didn't bother brushing across. The water on the right is a little more in shadow, so I've left it a little darker. And I've added a little more brightness to the left hand side. Now, my fan brush, in a little drop of liquid clear. I've gone into some of my grubby titanium white and I've tinted it with a little bit of phthalo blue. I think you can guess what's coming next. A waterfall. Be sure to groom your brush well. Now, pick your spot carefully and make sure you come in fairly level. I want to come in just above this dark area on my painting. I'll put a little mark there first and work out where I want it to be. It looks a little bit lopsided to me, but I'll fix that later. Now, apologies. When I filmed this, I didn't realise I had my big fat hands in the way as usual. I'll add a little bit of B-roll above, just to show you the technique. Firm pressure across and then whoosh, let the brush just fall. I want some rocks to hold my waterfall in. I've got my filbert brush and some black and Van Dyke brown. Load the brush well. I want to put a rock on the right and on the left that's a little higher than the top of the waterfall. If it's lower, well, the water would just roll over the edge. I'll block this in and then put a rock in on the other side. I'm not sure I like the rock on the right. It looks a bit sort of bold, but we'll see how that works out later on. I want to add some more foliage to the left hand side and to the right hand side. Again, the idea is to make you look at the waterfall and then into the distance. It's sort of like a theatre. You're just adding props to the side to direct your eye to the background. let's add some highlights to my rocks. White, Van Dyke brown, dark sienna, and yes, a little yellow ochre. I absolutely love this combination for rocks. Notice how lightly I marble mix my colours. I use the small blade of my knife. I just dig in and get a small roll of paint, and then with a super light touch, the light's coming from the top right hand side, and I just let the knife touch. The Van Dyke brown and black colour is very sticky, and it'll take the colour from my knife and give me back what it doesn't want. Remember to let the colour run out here and there. I think over highlighting rocks is probably one of the biggest problems people have. They just want to do too much with it. My top tip: less is definitely more on rocks. I add a little bit of highlight to the rocks on the right. I'm still not in love with those rocks. I think it's heading for a change, and you'll see how I make alterations on my painting as I go. Time to get my oval brush back into play, back into the cad yellow and the Indian yellow mix. Again, a nice firm pressure, give it a good push. Just tap gently, and between each tap consider where you place the next brush stroke, saving dark as you go. If you enjoy my tutorials and want to show your support, don't forget, leave a little like, that's a thumbs up. You can also subscribe, it's free, and you can watch all the latest tutorials as I release them. Thank you. Time to fix my wonky waterfall. A few waterlines will help. There. Now, time to add a little splash and crash to the base of the waterfall. I'm using the corner of my fan brush and I'm just pressing into the canvas and letting the bristles sort of splay. The bristles leave little speckles of paint, just like splashing water. Don't let your brush slide when you're doing this. Remember, it's just texturing the canvas. Leave a little dark here and there as well. Add a few waterlines to complete the illusion that the river is splashing into a little pool. Those dark reflections are from overhanging trees. Talking of which, let's add one. I'm using the short blade of my palette knife to start with. This is a neat little trick and a definite top tip. Scrape out the position of the tree trunk first. This will really help your tree trunk stick to the canvas without having to fight its way through all those highlight colours in the background. Now, let's mix more Van Dyke brown and black on my palette. Press it down firmly, slide up and gather a little roll of paint. With firm pressure, press and just drag across. I want to just stain the canvas. I think sometimes people put a little too much paint on their canvas and the highlights have trouble sticking. Notice I really press it into the canvas. I remove the surplus paint and use it elsewhere on the tree trunk. Let's add some branches to my tree. Top tip: take care not to paint a palm and 5 fingers, or a chicken's foot. I also look at the width of my trunk. I want to make sure that it's fairly even all the way down, not big and bulbous at one spot and then skinny elsewhere. I think I'm going to add a few highlights. A silver birch, of course. I've taken some fresh titanium white paint and I'm going to add a speck of Indian yellow to it. I want just an off-white colour for this, not pure white. I pick up a very small roll of this off-white paint. Super light touch, folks. Create a little curved stroke. The highlight is coming from the right, so touch and pull across. The small amount of black and Van Dyke brown will take the colour from your palette knife. Work slowly and progress up the tree trunk. Again, gentle, light touch. And get that little curving stroke and then lift off. Don't do this in a hurry or after you've had a strong coffee. You need a steady hand. I'll add a few more little touches of colour in here and let them grey down a little bit. They're not going to catch the light quite as much. Bob used to love a little blue colour to the reverse side of his tree, something called referred light. It was light that reflected back maybe from the surface of the water or from another tree. I'll just touch a little here, but that's a little too bright and white. I think I'll add a little touch more of the phthalo blue colour and see if I can cover it up. No, not quite. I'll have to do a better repair than that. I'll add a touch of my original dark black and brown colour, just to break it up. There you are. You would never know. It's a neat touch, but that little bit of blue really makes the tree pop. Now I have a little bit of a bulge here in my tree, and I'll add a little broken branch to it. A perfect disguise for a little, well, happy accident. Maybe a perch for a nice kingfisher. I'll add a little bit of the blue-grey colour to these rocks as well, just to make sure it's in a couple of spots of my painting. I'll even try some on this rock, but no, I'm still not in love with that rock. I don't know what it is. The size? The shape? No, it just doesn't sit very nicely in my painting. I even try putting a bit more of the dark colour back over the top. What do you think? Keep it or change it? Let's add a few more branches to my birch tree. A couple of drops of thinners in the Van Dyke brown and black mix. Once again, hold your brush at the far end and just let the bristles wiggle and jiggle across the canvas. I paint with the extreme tip of the brush. I find it gives me some lovely fine brush strokes. If there's a lump or a bump on the tree trunk that you want to sort of cover up, you can make it a starting point for a nice branch. How did I manage to get my little finger in the way this time? I don't know how I do it sometimes. A few more on the other side just to add a sense of balance to the tree. Now, do you remember I had a tree that I really didn't like the look of earlier on in the painting? Well, by pure luck, it appears that I have put my tree trunk right across it. Maybe I can use this as part of the foreground tree. Well, wouldn't you know? That was a bit of luck, wasn't it? I've washed out my 1-inch oval brush, and I'm going to use some dark green colour, black and sap green mixture, for some foliage. This shows you how you can use this brush to do underpainting as well as highlighting. Again, I pressed in firmly. Notice I still have the Bob Ross logo facing up. I tap gently and stand back. Make sure you walk away from your painting so you're not over filling it with colour. I want some of my background trees just to sort of peek through. Remember, this is supposed to be a springtime painting. I think I could lose that corner though. There. Foliage at this time of year tends to be lighter and thinner. It's not fully developed into a proper summer tree yet. So I just tap here and there. I leave a few branches peeking through. I'm going to use my 1-inch brush for the highlights. Notice again, I have my Bob Ross logo showing. I press and pull down and groove my paint to make a sort of curtain of colour, and then I press up into the paint and allow the bristles to splay apart. By using the brush the same way each time, the bristles become sort of trained and they spread apart evenly every time. There. Notice how the paint is right on the edge of my brush. I tip the brush over on a corner and tap gently. Think about the shape and form of each of these branches. Don't over highlight everything. Brighter on the right, darker on the left. Notice how I tap and then reload. Move to a new branch and tap and reload again. Work steadily. Take your time with this. If you do, you'll be rewarded with a lovely tree. Time to fix this rock. I'm going to carry on using my old 1-inch brush and just dab on some more black and green colour. Yes, there's some highlights on there, but not that many. I'll just press them down into the canvas. This is a bit like painting those background trees we did at the very beginning. I'm going to use the corner of my nice 1-inch brush to tap on some grassy effects. I'll follow the lay of the land and let my grassy area extend over the edge of the rocks. I'll add a few little sparklers here and there to indicate the light is coming strongly from the right hand side of my painting. I'll save a little shadow here and there as well. I'll add a few sparklers to this bank as well, just to even up my painting. Again, stand back and look at your painting from the other side of the room and see how well balanced it is. Sometimes it just takes a few dots of colour here and there. For some detail, again, I use my liner brush and a few drops of thinners with some dark green and black. Let's see if I can get my little finger in the way this time as well. I'm really enjoying this painting, but I can't help feeling there's something missing. Time for a field trip. So, I'm really happy with my painting. I was even happy enough to sign it, but there was something missing. Time for the field trip. I need some more seasonal colour for my painting. Today we visit the town of Arundel, in the heart of the South Downs, and the beautiful white hawthorn greets us, along with lots of cow parsley and other lovely lime green trees, a clear indication of spring. Here we see the River Arun, a strong tidal river, and there on the hill, Arun Cathedral. The riverbanks are awash with colour, mainly white colours at this time of year, but there are forget-me-nots and some little marsh marigolds as well. Let's not forget, Arundel also has a castle. The dragon was out today, but they'll be back next time. Arundel also has a rather lovely bridge. Seeing the lovely white hawthorn, I feel inspired to put some in my painting. I have some pure titanium white paint and I'm going to use my fan brush. I press into the paint to splay the bristles open and select this little tree and add a few speckles of pure white to it. That really looks lovely now, doesn't it? Maybe I'll add some to the one right next door to it. Another stroke of luck. It looks like my reflections in the water line up perfectly. Let's turn this into a hawthorn bush as well. The problem is it looks like, well, a triangle. I'll add a few little speckles of colour to break up the shape. By standing back, I spotted that little, well, happy accident. Standing back is key to improving your paintings. I think I also need a little splash of colour here. Some of the little yellow water marigolds and some little primroses, I think, are what is needed. And above them, the bobbing frothy heads of cow parsley. This really brings my painting to life, and in the blink of an eye, it's finished. So there you have it. Take a Bob Ross classic like Splashes of Autumn and change the seasons. It's an easy adaptation to one of Bob's classic paintings. Now, don't move. There's another lovely Bob Ross painting coming right along. Happy painting, people.